Okay, we've killed this moose about 3 days ago now, and we're getting ready to be picked up. And I wanted to talk just a little bit about the difference between synthetic bags and cotton bags over a protracted period of wet weather. It's been pretty damp today. Yesterday was really nice. So we had everything out. It was really dry. We looked really good. But we've got a really damp day today. So what we did is we covered our meat cache area. What I'm doing here is I'm just pulling the bags off the meat where it's stuck to the meat. But you can see if we turn this front shoulder over, the bag is really adhering to the meat. So a couple of points on that. First of all, the weather's really cold, so we're okay temperature-wise. I'm not really worried about surface bacterial contamination so much because we're getting picked up today. But if I was going to be out in the field with this meat a few more days, I would definitely spray it with citric acid solution and try to get it up off the ground. We're out here in the tundra, so there's really no way to hang the meat or build even a brush pile. There's no brush. So it's definitely a challenge. About all you can do in this kind of situation is try to get the meat up high on these hummocks and keep it with minimal ground contact, and then turn it over regularly. We turned these this morning and they were dry on top, but when we flipped them over they were wet underneath, and you can see now the exact opposite is true. They're dry on top again and they're wet underneath. So this surface was dry this morning, now it's damp. The problem with the synthetic bags in this situation is that the material can't vent nearly as well as cotton, and it's a non-absorbent material. Over here I've got some meat in cotton bags. I think this is neck and trim. And the bag, if I feel the bag, it's still really damp. So I still have a moisture issue here, and it's going to take a long time for this cotton bag to dry, quite honestly. But what's happening is it's absorbing the moisture that's trying to evaporate off this meat. So that's a good thing, but it's a negative at the same time because it's absorbing moisture, but it also keeps the moisture trapped within the fibers of the cotton. But if we had a sunny day, this bag would be dry by the end of the day. Now, so will these, but you're still going to have moisture inside the bag. So what I would recommend in a situation like this, get the meat up off the ground. What we would have to do in this case, if we were going to be stuck here at the lake for a few more days, is we'd go down to the river and get some brush and haul it up here to try to get it up off the ground as much as we could. If we didn't have that option, then we'd be looking at some of these hummocks out here, and we would position our meat on top of the hummocks and allow the moisture to evaporate off the bottom and the top at the same time. And then we would just be rotating the bags every few hours. But all in all, the meat's in really good shape. I'm not worried about it at all. Over here we've got our cape, and what we did is we put it in a regular game bag. We salted it. We gave it one dose of salt. I prefer about 50 pounds for a moose cape, and the reason for that is because we use about 20 to 25 pounds on the first salting, and then we'll roll it and let it sweat overnight, and then we'll shake it out and we'll hit it another time with another dose of salt, and then we roll it up and forget about it for the rest of the hunt. In this case, this cape has only been salted one time, and so it's still got a lot of moisture in it to be extracted out. So what we did last night was we salted it, rolled it, put it in a poly bag, not a plastic bag, but a nylon grain sack, similar to the ones that we use for our food and whatnot. And then that bag is able to ventilate a little bit and also let moisture out of the bag. So we did that last night. We had that down by the river. It just got too late to get everything packed up here. So then this morning, what we did is we shook all the salt out of it, re-rolled it, and put it in a regular cotton game bag. Before we load this in the airplane, what we're going to do is put it in a contractor trash bag so we don't leak salt water all over the guy's airplane. And I'm sure he'll appreciate that. We've also saved out a tarp, a clean tarp. We'll put that on the floor of the aircraft before we load our meat in. Most pilots prefer to load the meat first because it's heavy and dense, and so they can load that and then they'll load the gear on top of it. So in order to facilitate that, we've kept a tarp out. We'll lay that on the floor of the aircraft, and they'll put our meat on top of that, and then we'll load our gear on top of the meat, and we'll be ready to go. Let's take a few minutes and talk about game bags that you need for your Alaska hunting trip. There are a lot of choices out there when it comes to game bags, and really I think they break down into one of three styles of material. The first type of material that you have is something like this, or even a thinner material. It's basically a cheesecloth material. It's very stretchy, and it's designed to cling to the game bag, or to the animal quarter. When you put the quarter in it, it's going to stick right to it. The cheesecloth material, in my experience, has been problematic because the holes in a lot of that material are so big that I've actually seen fly eggs go right through the material to the meat. So at that point, what's the reason for even having a game bag? So the cheesecloth material, even though it's lightweight, it's problematic from the standpoint of allowing fly eggs to get through. This material is a little bit thicker, so it's probably not going to let fly eggs pass through, but it's got a couple of problems. Number one, it clings directly to the meat, and that's really not a desirable feature in a game bag. I want a bag that hangs loosely around that quarter because I need good airflow over the surface of that meat so the meat can get dry. There are 3 rules of meat care that we talk about, and one of them is keep it clean, the second one is keep it cool, and the third one is keep it dry. And it's hard to keep meat dry when you've got material in direct contact with it. So I don't like a clingy game bag. I want one that hangs loosely around that quarter. The second problem that the cheesecloth material has is that it's really fragile. Keep in mind, on a hunting trip, you're going to be moving that meat multiple times, even on a drop camp. Once you get it hanging in the tree, you might take it down and spray it down with citric acid solution, in which case you're going to have to pull the game bags off and put them back on. If you're on a float hunt, it's even worse. You're going to be taking that meat on and off the raft multiple times, hanging it multiple times. With a thin, flimsy bag material, you just add to the potential of ripping a hole in the game bag. So you're better off with a little bit heavier bag that's not quite so fragile and is not going to allow fly eggs to pass through, certainly. So the cheesecloth material, I really don't recommend. That brings us to basically the other 2 choices, and that is the cotton bags, the standard cotton game bags, or the synthetic bags. Now, the synthetic bags are a recent arrival on the scene, and so let's just talk about those for a minute here. This particular one, there's a couple of companies that make these synthetic bags, but the ones that I've been using are made by Pristine Ventures out of Fairbanks, and they're called tag bags. The tag bags have a draw cord at the top, and they close down like this. There's a little toggle here. You can cinch it down. The bags are really roomy. This one is plenty big enough for a moose quarter. I've measured a lot of moose quarters, and the longest piece that you're going to pull off of that moose is the front shoulder. From the top of the scapula to the knee joint is about 48 inches on the average. The tag bags are a generous 50 inches, and some of them are even longer than that, and they're plenty roomy to hang around the game bag, so I get lots of air space around that quarter because the bag is hanging loosely on it. Now, a couple of cautions on the synthetic bags. First of all, any bag, regardless of whether it's synthetic or cotton or whatever, if it has a draw cord at the top, when you cinch that draw cord down, there's a possibility that you're going to have a perfectly round fly-sized hole right in the top of the bag when you cinch it down, because when the bag material gathers together, it can't close all the way. So once you get that quarter in there, cinch it down really good, but then take the cord and go around below the top of the bag and cinch it down. Put a couple of really good solid half hitches in that, and that's going to keep the flies out of the bag. Make sure you cinch it down really good. Okay, so that's one of the synthetic bags. Now, a couple of things about game bags in general before we start talking about the cotton bag. Well, let's just jump into the cotton bags right now. This is a small cotton game bag, obviously not a very big one. I would probably use this one for tenderloins or possibly backstraps on a caribou. It's a little too small for backstraps on a moose. But you've got these in a lot of different sizes. This is a cotton bag. It does not have a draw cord at the top, so you're going to need to bring parachute cord with you. And you'll gather the top of it together. You'll tie it really tight with parachute cord. It's helpful if you can tie your parachute cord before you leave for the field. Just cut it out into some 4-foot lengths or so, 3-foot lengths, tie a loop around one end, and then store those with your cotton bags, and then you're all ready to go. You save a little bit of time out in the field. Now, the difference between cotton bags and synthetic bags are breathability and absorption. Those are the two primary issues that we have to deal with. Breathability is really important in a game bag. If we cannot get air to flow through this material, then what's going to happen is we're going to trap moisture between the bag and the quarter. While I've got that meat hanging in camp on my meat pole, moisture is constantly evaporating off of it. Even though it feels dry on the surface, you know, when you touch it, it feels dry, there's still moisture coming off of that meat. You've got molecules of water evaporating off of that. What we want is a game bag that allows those water molecules to pass off of that quarter into the bag material and evaporate off on the outside. That allows the drying process to continue while our meat is hanging in camp. If our weave of material is too tight to allow water to pass through, or to allow those water molecules to pass through, then all we're doing is creating a humid environment inside that bag, because the moisture is going to keep evaporating off whether the bag breathes or not. So that moisture will collect in the bag material, and then it'll either evaporate off or it won't. If it doesn't, then I've got a humid environment inside the bag, and my quarters are going to be ripe for spoilage. Meat goes bad one of two ways: from the outside in or from the inside out. From the outside in, we're talking about surface contamination from bacterial accumulation. So bacteria will get on the surface of that meat, will start to multiply, and it'll eventually spoil that quarter. The way you know whether you're in danger or not is you can feel that quarter. Just pull the bag off of it and feel it. If it feels slick on the outside, you're feeling the waste product of billions of bacteria that are in the surface of that meat multiplying in that warm, moist environment. So the key to prevent that is to create a dry environment on the outside of that quarter, and that means we need a game bag that breathes really well. How do we know if the bag breathes? First thing I'm going to do when I'm looking for new game bags, if I'm shopping around and I can't find the brand I'm used to using, then I'm going to try something different. So I'm going to pull a bag off the shelf and I'm going to give it the blow test. That means I'm going to put the material up to my mouth and try to blow air through it. If air flows through it pretty easily, I'm in business. As long as it's not a clingy material and it's not flimsy, if I can get air through it, I'm good to go. Now, keep in mind that when fabrics are manufactured, they are sprayed with a starch called sizing. And the purpose that sizing serves during the textile manufacturing process is to make the material more rigid so it can pass through the sewing machines without binding up and causing problems. So that means that when you buy your cotton game bags, they have sizing sprayed on them already. And that is going to inhibit the airflow. So the only way you really know what the airflow is on your bags is to wash them to get rid of that sizing. So run them through the washing machine, put them in the dryer, get them nice and dry, or hang them up and line dry them if you want. But then do your blow test, and if you've got good airflow through that material, you're in business. Now, the beauty of a cotton bag is, first of all, most of them have excellent airflow. So as that moisture is evaporating off the meat, it's going to wick out into the bag material and evaporate right off. Any kind of a breeze coming through or whatever, it's going to suck that moisture right out of the bag. It's a cotton material, so it will absorb moisture. Even if breathability is a potential issue, the material itself will absorb the moisture. So as it starts to evaporate off that quarter, that moisture is going to penetrate into the cotton material, and then it'll eventually dry. So cotton is an excellent material for long-term hanging your meat in camp. The synthetic material, on the other hand, doesn't really pass the blow test very well. And you'll pull the bag material up here. It's a lot harder to get air through this material because the weave is really tight. So number one, we've got a problem with ventilation from the standpoint of the airflow through the material. I've used these bags out in the field. We did a test a few years ago, and I've got it posted on outdoorsdirectory.com called the game bag test. We hung half of our moose in synthetic bags. We hung the other half in cotton bags. We almost lost the 2 quarters that were hanging in the synthetic bags, and it just happened that we were able to get it out of the field in time, and so we were okay. But had we not gotten it out sooner, we would have sprayed it with citric acid solution and we would have been in better shape. We'll talk about citric acid here in a minute. So the blow test is definitely an issue with the synthetic material. It just doesn't provide good airflow. The other problem is that it's essentially a plastic, and so it's a non-absorbent material. So as water molecules are evaporating off of that quarter, it's not going to absorb into the synthetic material. It's going to be trapped inside the bag. So why are these bags so popular? Well, the short answer to that is that they pack up into a really small package. Here I've got enough bags to do a whole moose. Put this one back in so you can see how small they pack up. I've got enough bags to do a whole moose in a package that's barely bigger than the size of a softball. You're much more likely to carry that out in the field than you are half a pack full of cotton bags. And this is just a couple of small cotton bags. If I had enough cotton bags here to do a whole moose, it would take up half the space in my backpack. They're heavy, bulky, take up a lot of room. So if I'm telling you that you should pack your game bags with you out to the kill site or carry them in your pack the whole time you're hunting, and I do, that's what I do when I'm guiding, I carry them in my pack, you're less likely to do it with the cotton bags than you would be with the synthetic bags. So here's my recommendation. First of all, also I forgot to tell you about toughness. This synthetic bag material, really rugged. Just as rugged as the cotton material. So both of them are good for multiple handlings in and out of the boat or what have you. The synthetic material, the synthetic material is a little bit thinner than the cotton, and it's more likely to rip, so you got to watch it. If you do get a tear in the cotton bag material, just gather the material up like that. Your tear is right here. Twist it a little bit, and then tie around that with parachute cord to keep it from slipping off, and then you've isolated that tear. You can do that on your cotton bags too, of course. So here's what I recommend that you do. Take the synthetic bags with you in your pack and use those for getting the meat from the kill site to camp. Remember, when you take the quarter off of that animal, or take any of the meat off that animal, flies are going to land on it and lay eggs on it if it's not protected. So you have to have your game bags with you while you're hunting. So use the synthetic game bags to get the meat from the kill site back to camp, and then when you get it back to camp, change out for cotton bags and leave them in the cotton bags for the rest of the hunt. If you're hunting with a partner, you're going to need 2 sets of cotton bags. So what you can do is, once you get your first animal down, you get it into camp, you change out for cotton bags, you've got a spare set of cotton bags sitting there in camp. So if your cotton bags get really wet, you can change out for that dry set and hang the wet ones up under your meat pole, or build a smudge fire so that the heat will circulate underneath that tarp and your bags will dry out, and now you've got your second set of dry bags that you can use for hanging your second animal. So that's the lowdown on cotton versus synthetic, and my recommendations for what you should use for game bags in the field. There are different sizes that you need for different size animal quarters, and we have that all listed in a chart on the website in our meat care section. All right, let's talk for a few minutes about citric acid powder and citric acid solution. You can buy citric acid powder at the pharmacy in large bulk quantities, or you can buy it online, and it's marketed under the name Alaska Game Saver. We carry it currently on the Outdoors Directory website. It comes in a little Ziploc pouch with a paper thing on here with some instructions. There's a couple of ounces of powder in here. That's enough to do your whole moose and have some to spare. You really don't need to use a lot. One of the problems with citric acid is I see hunters really overdoing it with the citric acid thing. This was all started a few years ago by Doug Drum from Indian Valley Meats. And he used to do a meat care seminar at the Great Alaska Sportsman Show in Anchorage. And then Doug had to go on to some other responsibilities, and I eventually ended up taking over the meat care seminars. Doug pioneered the use of citric acid solution for creating an acidic environment on the outside of your meat to prevent bacteria from multiplying, and it's very effective for doing that. However, I've carried citric acid powder in my pack for over 20 years and have yet to use it. It's not that I don't know how to use it, it's just that I've never had a need to use it. What you have to do is take good care of that meat in the field, and unless you have really warm, really moist conditions out in the field, which you generally don't have in the month of September. Sometimes we'll have situations like that where we'll have a warmer fall, and then in that case, then go ahead and use your citric acid. Okay, so here's how the citric acid works. Remember earlier I said that meat goes bad one of 2 ways, from the outside in or from the inside out. From the outside in, you're talking about spoilage on the surface layer from bacterial contamination. So what happens is, as soon as you take the hide off that animal, man, I got bugs all around me here. Bear with me while I swat a few. Okay. What happens is, as soon as you pull the hide off of that animal, bacteria will land on the surface of that meat and they begin to multiply in that warm, moist environment. If you can get that quarter dry by hanging it in a good game bag with good ventilation and good wicking ability, then you should not have a moisture problem on the surface of that meat. However, if you do develop a moisture problem, your game bags are wet, or you only have synthetic bags and the moisture is trapped in the bags and so on, then you're going to need to look at using citric acid solution. So what you'll do is you'll take your citric acid powder, you'll mix it with some clean filtered water. You don't want to spray Giardia all over your meat. Get a water filter and get a small pump spray bottle like this. This holds about half a pint. Mix up your citric acid solution per the directions, and then pull the game bags off and spray the meat with it liberally so it's all coated with citric acid solution. If you can, leave the game bags off until the meat dries again, and then put the bags back on. If you put the bags on while the meat is still wet, what's going to happen is your game bags are going to blot that citric acid solution off the meat, and you're not going to have nearly as much effect. So if you can let it dry a little bit, that's really helpful before you put the game bags on. However, if you've got a fly problem and there's a possibility that they could land on the meat and lay eggs, you want to get those game bags on right away. One trick you can use to keep the flies off the meat if it is warm is go ahead and build a smudge fire, a good smoky fire, at one end or both ends of your meat pole, and let that smoke waft over the meat, and that'll keep the flies off until you can get a good hard glaze on the outside of that meat. You're going to be babysitting that meat the whole time, so just, be prepared for that. So you spray your meat, you put the game bags back on it, and then close it up. You probably are not going to have to apply citric acid anymore during the rest of your hunt. In fact, you probably aren't going to need to put it on until about day 3 or 4. And then after that, you don't need to treat it again for the rest of your hunt. If you're on a 10-day hunt and you spray it during the midpoint, day 4 or 5, something like that, that should be good for the rest of your trip. Now, the way you can verify that is you want to feel the surface of that meat. So open one of the bags and feel the outside. If it's got a good hard glaze on it, there is no need to put citric acid solution on there again. If the meat is damp and it feels slick, that slickness that you're feeling is the waste product of all those bacteria multiplying in the surface of the meat, so you're at risk of spoilage at that point. So what you'll do then is go ahead and pull the game bags off of all of it, spray it again with citric acid, and then again wait for it to dry and bag it, and you're good to go. So that's the story on citric acid solution. Probably not going to have to use it in the field, but it's something that you should bring with you. Doesn't weigh very much. And so go ahead and get the powder and get the spray bottle. And again, we do carry the powder on outdoorsdirectory.com. We have it in our bookstore, and our shipping price is really cheap. We ship everything out priority mail, so it'll be in your hands really quickly, and it's probably a good idea to have it. One final thing on game bags that I might mention is we talked about the synthetic bags and keeping those in your pack while you're hunting, but what do you do with your cotton bags? Because they're so bulky and heavy, what I do with my cotton bags is I'll put them either in a poor man's dry bag, and you can look on our YouTube channel for the directions on how to make a poor man's dry bag, or I'll put them in a regular rafting bag. So I'll take my game bags, my cotton bags, I'll put them in a rafting bag, I'll throw my citric acid powder and my pump spray bottle and all of the ropes that I'm going to use for hanging my quarters. I'll put all of that in that dry bag, and I leave it either on the raft or I leave it in camp, because I'm only going to use that stuff when I'm actually in camp. So just put all that in its own separate bag, and you won't have to touch it until you're ready to actually bag the meat in camp. That's pretty much it on game bags. There's some more details that we have on the website that you're more than welcome to read, as well as the game bag test and some other comparatives that we've done between cotton bags and different types of game bags and the synthetic bags and so on. So that's pretty much our comments on game bags. Good luck and have a great night.